Well, I figured the cat's out of the bag. Yes, it is me. SATIRMETH, amphetamine. And today, I'll be teaching you spoiled brats about the curse of the Kurger king. And to get into the mood, I even am using this Kurger Bing hat I stole from SATIRMETH when he was recording a music video with basically SpongeBob and Gut Skillet. Go check them out. Or not. I don't care. But they say that heavy is the head that runs. What? Heavy is the head that wears the crown. And so is my head after wearing this, so I won't wear it for the whole video, but whatever. Make sure to screenshot it and turn it into a meme or whatever you youngins do. So, in order to grasp the concept of Kurger being the Kurger king and the Kurger being the king, we need to go all the way back to the logo. Right. So, Kurger Bing went through major changes throughout its entire history, and we'll be covering most of the Kurger Bing history, focusing mostly on the current CEO, Kevin K. Kane. But look at this. I may be a satirical person, but I'm also a design nerd. So look at this. 1920, Kurger Bing is first established. They say that Kurger Bing was first concepted. It was, what's the word? Give me it. It was first brought sweetly into the world by a man named David Edgerton. Now, David Edgerton was kind of a sly guy, if you know what I mean. Kind of the most business owner-y person of the Gilded Age of the United States. 1920. Kurger Bing was revealed in a wet dream to Mr. Edgerton. Hence, the first logo, 1920. We can see the smart design choices that this Edgerton guy created, such as the iconic arch, the two patties, the monospace serif Kurger, and the cursive, more light-hearted Bing with a little star on the end. So, the really smart aspects of this design choice, really, I'd say, are the curves. Yes, since Mr. Edgerton, I'll call him Edge from now on. Since Mr. Edge had sort of a lonely life, he was always coming up with things in his dreams, and this was the pinnacle of attractiveness in the dream. You can see the way that this forward 100 centuries later to 2020. And this is the current logo. Kind of a disappointment, I know. See that? That's who you don't want your son to date. This is a disappointment. Kurger being not in monospace. In like Comic Sans. Look at this. See that? Honestly, what are you doing, Kurger Bing? So, moving past the logo, you can jump on in into 1920. 1920 to around 1940, also known as the rise of Kurger Bing. So, around this time, famous entrepreneur, oh, was he again? I always forget, I'm sorry. So, famous plantation owner turned entrepreneur, still a plantation owner, also known as David Edgerton, was the first major CEO of Kurger Bing. He ran the company for about 20 years, hence 1920 to 1940, born from a poor family who could not afford even Gucci nor Lorraine. They had to settle on heated carpets and Victorian homes. So, David Edgerton had to grow up along by only having the latest TV channels and only the latest Labubu's. He had to buy a house with his hard-earned $10, with only one luxury indoor pool and only 2 golden retrievers. So you see, David Edgerton, while sitting in his small mansion, had a crazy idea. What if, instead of selling sandwiches, he sold German burgers? Because you see, at this time, a certain party in Germany was starting to rise, and they seem to have invented a prototype of a burger. But this guy turned it into a real American burger. So, he thought and thought and thought until, in one of his many lucid dreams, he saw a bluish arch, a burger, but inscribed was the name of a company, Kurger Bing. The name really made no sense to him, but he decided to roll with it since what was really wrong with naming a sort of company Kurger Bing, you know? So it began. His empire grew. His ego grew. His length stayed the same. And over the course of many years, he really became a certain, how do I say this, kind of eccentric person. You know, like everybody's cool Uncle Joe. You know, he really seemed to be really hip with the newest trends, such as, instead of having short hair like a normal male, he had slightly long hair. crazy for the time, I know. And so, during the rise of the first few decades of Kurger, he decided to hire a bunch of workers from all over the world. Diversity, I know. And he decided to split them up into two groups, each based on their abilities and needs. The first group, let's name this guy. Give me a sec. Let's name this guy William. What did I say? William Crumb. So, any certain William Crumb, you know, little normal person, got jobs at Kurger by working as their their waiters, their business managers, statisticians, mathematicians. What else? Give me a second. They're spokespeople, advertisers. And he decided to sort everyone else into the second class. Let's call the second class person Martin Smith. Now, this Martin Smith would be hired to be the cooks, the chefs, the janitors, and really any other sort of job that Gilded Age people didn't want to see. So, these names, inscribed in history, became sort of the three tiers of Kurger early years. The CEO, the first-class workers, and the second-class workers. I guess we'll call them proletarians. So during the rise, kept getting bigger and bigger, the empire, until certain one day around let me check my notes. On a certain day in 1941-43, a little battle broke out. So Kurger had a lot of supporters on both sides of the war. The two sides were fighting each other, but really, they had a lot in common. So after this whole war, there was war, there was panic, and not at a disco. The war of 1940 was spread across multiple continents, and we were facing a little altercation between the United States of America and the bad guys. Now, I say bad guys because they really, as I said before, shared a lot in common. Sort of capitalist ideals, that sort of thing. And really, the workers of Kurger, both the CEOs, the top, and the first-class workers, really sided with both sides of the war. But really, the only thing that made them favor the United States of America more is because David Edgerton was born right there, and also because most of Kurger establishments sourced their supplies from the United States of America. Hooray! So, fast forward a few years, war ends, and let's just say that my little David boy, Mr. Edgerton, didn't really have any, he wasn't really prepared for war as a CEO, So he got booted, kicked out in a state of emergency. And it transitioned onto what I call the second era of Kurger. And now we move on into the 40s through the 80s. Or what I personally like to call the plateau and the fall of Kurger. Now, around this time, if I remember correctly, what I recorded just a few minutes ago, David Edgerton got kicked out of the company rapidly, almost unanimously, though there were no votes to be confirmed cast against him. We moved on from Edgerton to James McLamer. Now, James McLamer was a very prominent figure during the second era of Kurger. Now, after the big war that happened between the USA and a few countries in Europe, the United States of America decided to fight against itself because it was going through a kind of identity crisis. Kind of like me. So, what happened was that the United States of America went through this kind of transitional period where it was fighting its neighbors, Canada and Mexico. So, it was fighting bits, then it realized that the problem was kind of in itself. So, it graciously decided to give up a few of its own territories, namely Washington, California, and a few states up north, and decided to rename itself into the United States of Fascism. Suspiciously, Florida got even longer, and Texas grew bigger somehow. Now, this guy, James McLamer, was a big fan of the change, and he decided that the best way to take advantage of the situation was to sell a ton of Kurger burgers during the war. So, this guy decided to super mega industrialize Kurger from a little kind of sort of family owned shop, though Edgerton didn't really have much of a family, to this big massive factory complex on almost every city in the United States of Fascism, or the United States of America. Well, it happened in between that period. So, McLamer decided to just start cranking up the industry of making Kurgers, of making Cries, and Cash Browns, because he was generous, and also because it made him a lot of cash, obviously. So, Kurgers. They're a kind of upgrade into what is usually known as a sandwich. You know, the sandwich went through its evolution in Germany into a burger, or a proto-burger, I suppose. The name burger kind of stuck around, tossed this and there during the era of, what was the name again? Edgerton, during the first 20 years of Kurger. And then, around the age of Mr. McLamer, he decided to advocate to rename all burgers in the United States to Kurgers. And that just became the lingo in the dictionary. From now on, using the word burger was forbidden, except when it was used by Kurger, of course, since it copyrighted both the word Kurger and burger. So this officially meant that all burgers are now Kurger burgers, and since they were Kurger burgers, they belonged to Kurger. So what he really did was he just said, "That's mine because I gave it a name, and now I'll have it. Thank you." And guess what? It did actually work. Good for him, I guess. So, mass production of these Kurgers. I'll draw a little example of what a Kurger looks like. Kurger, and I'll do a little example of cries. So right here is what you call a Kurger with some cries. Now, they're already popular with most of the citizens of the United States of America, but during the war, soldiers were hungry. So he came up with the genius plan to sell the Kurgers to the military of the soon-to-become United States of Fascism, and they gave the soldiers in that military Kurgers. Kurgers for breakfast, Kurgers for lunch, and Kurgers for dinner. All with a few left to supply, of course. Now, the thing that happened was that, how do I explain this? Well, the Kurgers kind of were made of whatever. So, the soldiers from the United States of Fascism kind of just got larger and larger and fatter. So large that the soldiers who were eating the Kurger burgers couldn't even fight in battle against Oregon, against Washington and California. So that plan turned out to be kind of a help in the first few years, but it turned out to be a big bust in the long run. Excuse me for the pun. And also, what do you think that the Kurgers are making the soldiers fatter? Well, you could say that the soldiers ate Kurgers day, night, and dinner, got addicted to them. They couldn't stop, even though they had other food options that were healthier. You could say it's because by this time Kurger Bing had advertisements all over the place, but no, I wouldn't really say that's the main cause. You see, there was a little how do I say this? Okay, that won't erase. So there was a little thing that Kurger burgers were made of. See? They had three main parts. Actually, they did have three main parts, but went down to 2.5 parts because the yucky stuff, the lettuce, the tomato, onions, and and sometimes pineapple got removed because customers were complaining it was too, it wasn't calorie dense enough. So they're made of three main parts. They were made up of the bun, the yucky vegetables, and the meat. Now the meat is really what's curious, because nobody really mentioned it, but in the days of Mr. Edgerton, the meat was actually made from dogs and cats. Yes, I know. And by this point, they were turning from a fashionable luxury meal to a household pet. So people got angry at Kurger Bing for making their meat from dogs and cats. So James McLamer decided to rationalize, and he decided to make the meat instead to be made from he decided to make the meat from box jellyfishes, dart frogs from the Brazilian rainforest, and whatever other animals he could find on the road. Yes, that is right. Jellyfishes and frogs in your burger. How amazing. But the thing is, nobody really cared about them. They were endangered, but he didn't really care about that fact. So the dart frogs and the box jellyfishes soon ran out. Well, they're still around right now, but they're kept in like kind of like containers to continuously breed them. And apart from that, the other animals had, how do I say this? The other animals weren't really hunted for their meats. You see, Mr. McLamer asked employees to just shoot any animal they could find on the road, and they did. Sometimes they brought them back home. Sometimes they just shoot the animals for fun. So really, that's most of Kurger Bing's plateau in fall. Fall, I say, because the controversy of the dogs and cats. And at the end of Mr. McLamer's legacy, it was rumored that somebody, news reporters, found multiple videos and images and stills of Mr. McLamer pulling a Dr. Disrespect in somebody's bed. So he was promptly kicked out of Kurger Bing. Or maybe he resigned. Actually, he didn't. Yeah, he didn't. Mr. McLamer was assassinated at a rally. But not because of the whole dogs and cats and the bed thing and the doctor disrespecting. No, it was actually because he forgot to honor like a few soldiers in the war between the United States of America and the United States of Fascism. So he was promptly executed. Yes, not very patriotic indeed. So, those are the first two eras of Kurger Bing. The rise of Edgerton's cool policies, zany ideas, and segregation. The plateau of Mr. McLemore's selling Kurgers during the war, and the fall with the three main controversies. We'll continue this in another video. Goodbye.